You arrive at a party, open a beer, take the first sip, feel that slight relaxation in your shoulders, that familiar feeling that things are okay.
And you probably think that this is a relatively recent invention of human civilization, a consequence of agriculture, of controlled fermentation from organized societies with enough free time to invent drinks.
Wrong. Completely wrong. The history of alcohol and humanity is much older, much stranger, and much more fundamental to who we are than anything you imagine.
And once you understand this story from the beginning, you will never look at a drink the same way again.
Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon.
Every week, we transform stories that seem simple into discoveries that change perspectives.
Let's start with a question that will reorganize everything in your head. Did humans invent alcohol or discover alcohol? The difference is huge, because if it was an invention, it is something we created deliberately. If it was a discovery, it is something that already existed in the world and that we found. And the answer is discovery. And this discovery was made long before any anatomically modern human ever existed.
Ethyl alcohol, ethanol, is naturally produced by the fermentation of sugars by yeasts.
Yeasts are microscopic fungi that exist everywhere in nature. Whenever fruit is ripe or overripe, especially in warm climates, fermentation is happening. Fruits fallen on the ground in high temperatures ferment in a matter of days, producing ethanol. And this ethanol has a specific smell, a sweet and slightly pungent odor, which is detectable from a distance. Now let's go back in time, long before humans, to primates, monkeys, our closest evolutionary ancestors. Researchers studying primates in wild environments have repeatedly observed that monkeys deliberately seek out fermented fruit. They choose fermented fruit over fresh fruit when both are available. They consume these fruits in sufficient quantities to produce visible effects of drunkenness and return to the same spot after knowing that fermented fruits are available there. This is no accident. This is preference. And there is a fascinating evolutionary theory about why this preference exists. Ripe fruits have more sugar, more calories. For an animal that lives by hunting and gathering, with no certainty of when it will eat again, calories are survival. And slightly fermented fruits have even more sugar available because the yeasts have already started breaking down fibers. They are even more caloric. So the instinct to seek out the smell of fermentation was basically a radar for extra calories, a location system for high-energy density food resources. And along with that came the sensation produced by ethanol: relaxation, reduced inhibitions, lightness. For an animal in a constant state of survival stress, this feeling was the signal that something good had happened. The brain associated fermentation with reward, and this association is so deeply engraved in our neurochemistry that it is still there today, 100,000 generations later. The drunken monkey hypothesis, formulated by biologist Robert Dudley of the University of California at Berkeley, proposes exactly this: that human attraction to alcohol is not a cultural weakness or social pathology, but an evolutionary instinct inherited from tens of millions of years of primates who survived better by finding fermented fruit. You didn't learn to like alcohol. You were born with the predisposition for it, and this predisposition is more than 10 million years old. But when humans went from opportunistic consumers of natural fermentation to deliberate producers of alcohol, that is the most fascinating transition in history. For most of human existence, alcohol was found, not produced. Our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, certainly consumed fermented fruit when they found it. Fermented honey when they discovered abandoned beehives. Fermented sap from certain trees. But all of this was opportunistic, depending on finding what nature produced. The deliberate production of alcohol has been archaeologically documented for at least 13,000 years. And what is extraordinary about this dating is that it is contemporary with, or perhaps even prior to, agriculture. This is revolutionary for history as we know it. The traditional view is that humans developed agriculture to produce food, especially grains, and that the fermentation of grains to produce beer was a secondary consequence of that agriculture. But archaeological evidence is increasingly suggesting the opposite, that the motivation to ferment cereals to produce alcoholic beverages may have been one of the primary drivers for the development of agriculture.
Not food first, but drink first. Why does this matter? Because it completely changes how we understand the most important transition in human history: sedentarization. Humans abandoned nomadism and began to settle in places to plant. And the question archaeologists ask is, why?
Sedentarism is much harder work than nomadism. It requires more effort, more vulnerability to diseases, more dependence on a single source of resources. Why would anyone do that?
If the answer is mainly food, the argument is that there was enough hunger to justify that effort.
But if the answer includes alcoholic beverages for social rituals and community ceremonies, the argument becomes much more powerful. Because alcohol in a ritual context is not a luxury, it's social cohesion, the lubricant of relationships between groups.
It's the substance that allows strangers to trust each other enough to cooperate.
And here comes something that will surprise you.
The oldest evidence of deliberate alcohol production doesn't come from a tavern, it comes from a temple.
Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is the archaeological site that rewrote our understanding of civilization.
It is a complex of monumental structures, 12,000 years old, built by hunter-gatherers before established agriculture.
And in these structures, archaeologists found huge stone containers, some with the capacity of hundreds of liters, with chemical residues from cereal fermentation.
Beer made on an industrial scale in a temple 12,000 years ago by people who were still hunting and gathering to survive.
This suggests that alcohol production was closely linked to ritual from the very beginning.
It wasn't individual weekend consumption, it was a collective sacrament.
It was the element that transformed a gathering of individuals into a community that marked important transitions, sealed agreements between groups, honored the dead, and celebrated births.
If you find this as fascinating as I do, stop for a second and leave a like. Share it with someone who would love to know this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the time.
Now let's talk about how alcohol spread across the world and was transformed in each culture in a specific way.
Because every civilization that encountered fermentation created its own version and assigned its own sacred meaning to it.
In ancient Egypt, beer was not a drink of pleasure, it was food.
Workers who built the pyramids received beer as part of their daily pay.
It was caloric, nutritious, and safer to drink than water from the Nile canals, which was frequently contaminated.
And slightly alcoholic enough to kill pathogens. Egyptian beer was public health and a payment system at the same time. In Mesopotamia, the goddess of beer was named Ninkasi. She had hymns dedicated to her.
One of these hymns is also the oldest beer recipe in existence.
Instructions for producing fermented barley drink, written on a clay tablet 4,000 years ago, wrapped in religious worship.
Recipe and prayer in the same document.
In China, evidence of the fermentation of rice, honey, and fruit dates back at least 9,000 years, found in ceramic jars at the Jiahu site.
In the Americas region, chicha made from chewed and spat corn, where saliva enzymes start the fermentation, is documented for at least 2,000 years and is still produced by Andean communities today.
On the African continent, fermented sorghum and millet drinks have a history of at least 4,000 years.
In each case, the pattern is the same. Alcohol emerges alongside complex social organization, alongside ritual, alongside markers of cultural identity.
Not after, but alongside it. But there is also the dark side of this story that needs to be told, honestly, because the same substance that facilitated social cooperation, lubricated negotiations, and marked sacred ceremonies also created addiction, violence, social degradation, and death on a scale that repeats in every culture that adopted it. The difference between cultures that maintained a relatively healthy relationship with alcohol and cultures that suffered from it doesn't seem to be the alcohol itself, it's the context. Cultures where alcohol was always linked to ritual, to a specific context, to a defined moment, tended to have more controlled consumption patterns. Cultures where alcohol became disconnected from any ritual context and became individual consumption at any time tended to have more destructive patterns.
Our ancestors at Göbekli Tepe drank beer ritually at specific times for specific reasons within a community context. Beer had meaning beyond pleasure, and this meaning naturally regulated consumption.
What does this tell us today? Perhaps that the question is not whether to drink or not to drink, but when, with whom, for what, and what the occasion means. Questions that all human cultures have answered in different ways throughout 12,000 years of deliberate alcohol production, and that each of us continues to answer every time we open a bottle.
The next time you raise a glass,
You are doing something that humans have been doing longer than any civilization you know. That primates have been doing longer than humans have existed.
which is linked to the deepest DNA of what we have learned about reward, survival, and social cohesion. Cheers.
Leave it in the comments. Did you know that alcohol might have been the reason why our ancestors stopped wandering?
And started building cities? See you next time.